Megyn Kelly is one of America's most famous television reporters and journalists, formerly at Fox News and then NBC. In 2014, she was listed on Time magazine's 100 most influential people. She's interviewed everyone from Vladimir Putin to the Kardashians and had a run-in with Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign.
Bimbo?
Well, there was a retweet, yeah. Did I say that?
Many times.
Ooh, okay. Excuse me.
What do you think
Not the most horrible thing, again, politically, not the most. Over your life, Megyn, you've been called a lot worse. Is that right? Wouldn't you say? You've had a life that's not been that easy. And
it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about the messaging to young girls and to other women.
One wag remarked after one of the debates that Megyn should be the presidential candidate. And not many people can boast of having been played by Charlize Theron in a Hollywood blockbuster, as Megyn was in the movie Bombshell.
Will other women come forward?
You may have heard there was a dust-up involving yours truly and presidential contender Donald Trump.
She's also penned a best-selling autobiography called Settle for More. And nowadays, Megyn runs and hosts her own news and commentary show, The Megyn Kelly Show podcast, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. I am delighted to welcome Megyn Kelly for the first time to Australia here on Outsiders. Megyn, great to see you. Is Joe Biden fantasising when he talks about unity?
Yes, 100%. That was a fantasy when he first said it, when he declared us unified on the day he accepted the victory. And it remains a fantasy. And to be honest, neither side really wants it. Even the Democrats, who at first were like, yes, let's unify behind Joe Biden's agenda, is what they really meant. When the shoe was on the other foot, you say, well, okay, how about the Republicans? What they want you to unify behind is a constitutional amendment banning abortion. They're like, never mind on the unity. They're just too divided. It's not going to happen.
James.
Well, I just want to follow up on that then, because with the divisiveness, I want to ask, what does Joe Biden's return to the politics of identity and critical race theory mean for America?
Well, that's the thing. He couldn't have picked a more divisive issue to start with than that. Maybe the country could have been focused on his COVID relief package if he hadn't been lecturing us all on our alleged white supremacy just because of our pigmentation from the beginning of his term. And, the first couple of things he's done, bringing back critical race theory at the federal level and for all agencies doing business and corporations doing business with the feds, and a promise to take away due process from young men who get accused of any sort of sexual assault or sexual harassment on college campuses. We just spent the last 4 years trying to restore, and I'm not talking about amazing due process rights. I'm talking about stuff that's built into our Constitution: the right to cross-examine, the right to have an attorney represent you, the right to discovery, none of which young men had under the Obama-Biden years. So Trump and Betsy DeVos bring it back, and one of Joe Biden's first goals is to restore it back the other way, take all that stuff away from young men who get accused. This is not unifying stuff, and these are unnecessary fights.
Rita.
Now, what's going to happen to the Trump base? Is the Trump phenomenon over now?
Definitely not. By the way, it's so exciting to talk to Rita because I love her on Twitter, and I never really get to see you actually on camera talking. But anyway, they're not going anywhere, right? They're diehards, and he's their hero. I just had a podcast the other day with a woman who was at the Capitol. She didn't riot, but she rallied. She really thought Trump was going to pull a rabbit out of the hat that day and emerge with a second term. And I said, who could you get behind? Who do you think you and your fellow patriots could get behind? She said, pretty much anyone with the last name Trump or Matt Gaetz, who's basically never seen Trump do something that he could object to. So they're diehard, and it's one of the problems for the Republican Party right now. It's very divided because the establishment, they don't want to see the Trumps again.
Megyn, I mentioned earlier your amazing broadcasting career, your interviewing career. So I've always wanted to know, who was scarier, Vladimir Putin or the Kardashians?
Well, as far as I know, the Kardashians have never had somebody killed after an interview before they left the country. So I'm going to have to go with Putin, who was definitely an intimidating figure and sort of getting up in his grill and really going after him. I'd been warned that there could be consequences to that, so that was in the back of my mind. But I will say the Kardashians, my main takeaway from having sat across from all of them at once was one is more beautiful than the next. Like, you don't know where to look. There's just, I realize it's enhanced and all that, but they are a gorgeous group of women. And you're just looking like Kendall Jenner, the one she's like got the skirt was up so high, it was like a belt. I'm like, is it a belt or a skirt? Either way, if my rear end looked like that, I'd be doing the same thing.
James.
I'm just imagining the Kardashians with nukes, but I got to ask you seriously, is the world a more dangerous place now under Joe Biden? I mean, what messages have his actions so far sent to rival countries like Russia and China?
Well, I mean, weakness. That's the problem with the Democrat foreign policy in a lot of instances in general, but also I will give this to Joe Biden, the problem in following Trump. Right, so Trump pulls us out of the Iran deal, which was celebrated by half the country over here. They were delighted to see that happen. The sanctions go back in place on our part. Iran continues developing its nukes on its part, and now Biden's like, okay, and we're back. Right, we want to let's bring it all back together. But neither side wants to blink. He doesn't want to take down our sanctions first. They don't want to stop doing their nukes first. But somebody's going to have to bend the knee. And given that it's Biden going back and knocking on the door, it's probably going to wind up being us. That's going to make him look weak. It's going to make us look weak. It's not all Biden's fault. It's a little bit on Trump, but it's one of the problems in sort of this swinging foreign policy that goes so far left and so far right every 4 years.
Rita.
Now, I want to turn your mind to the media. Why do so few Americans trust the media? Who's at fault there?
Well, the media, they have themselves to blame. They really have only themselves to blame. Trump accused them of bias. It wasn't true, and they made it true. I mean, they were biased against the right before Trump, but they weren't showing it. They had the dignity and the respect to at least try to hide it, and he's exposed it, and they've exposed themselves. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe knowing the truth, knowing what's really there is better than deluding yourself that, the mirage that's being presented is real. But I don't see it coming back unless you get a ton more Republicans at senior editorial levels within these news organizations, which they don't want. Barry Weiss of the New York Times, this great reporter, she was on the show not long ago. The New York Times hired her because they wanted somebody who could help them understand different viewpoints. What happened? She got bullied right out of the Times. Even NBC hired somebody like me. I'm right of center. That ended in disaster. So it's just like they say they want people who don't think the way they do. It doesn't wind up working out because they don't really.
Megyn, on that issue, has the tone of the reporting changed since Biden came in on COVID, on kids in cages and other big issues?
Well, as soon as the media wakes back up, I will let you know. I will listen to the tone, and I will report back on what I hear. But they're asleep right now, so we'll have to get back to you.
Megyn, you've always had an amazing connection with Middle America. Will Middle America accept Joe Biden's radical embracing of the transgender agenda?
No, absolutely not. They won't. This is why somebody like J.K. Rowling pushes back on the need to call women people who menstruate, right? She's like, hold on, sit down, right? And all the wokesters online, which is really not even liberals, that's like the far left, it's the radical left, there's like, transphobe. And my imaginary viewer, who's named Madge, and she lives in Iowa, and she works all day, she comes home at night and has a glass of wine and consumes the news, it is on J.K. Rowling's side. We can be respectful of the trans community and still be respectful of women and girls when it comes to things like girls' sports. We have to be able to talk about this stuff without being demonized as bigoted as soon as we don't agree that yesterday there were 2 genders and today there are 100.
James.
I just want to ask, are Joe Biden and the Democrats now, with their executive order agenda and a lot of other things they're working on, attempting to enshrine a permanent Democrat majority where Republicans just won't have a chance at getting into national office?
Well, I mean, a lot of people think that's what the attempt to legalize, to grant citizenship to the 11 million people who are here without documents is. Right, that what they really want, the real reason to create a path to citizenship for the 11 million people who are here undocumented, is to get another 11 million Democrats registered to vote. And there's a pretty strong argument to that effect. Republicans have gone at it by trying to redistrict the country to the place where they have the strongest chance of winning. That's sort of been their traditional method, and they've done it to great effect. And the Democrats want to keep adding new states like Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. And, now we're going to have, I guess, a new branch of Texas or New Mexico with our new citizens, all of whom they are counting on to vote Democrat.
Well, Megyn Kelly, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders. You've got Madge in Ohio. We've got Mrs. Kafoops down in Ballarat, so maybe we should get them together at some stage and they'd have a great old natter. Megyn Kelly, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders.